All right. Welcome, everybody. We're having an open office conversation today about Thumballs and everything Thumball, how we're using them, what our challenges are. And really, I hope this to be a conversation that can be useful to the folks on the phone, not focusing on my trying to teach or tell, but really having an opportunity for everyone to share, ask questions, either of me or of one another. Debbie, I could see in the background you pulled out a Thumball, and I have like 10 of them in my office right now. So welcome, and feel free also to add a chat, to add some questions, either of one another or of us. And I put in a first question, if you've used Thumballs, how many are in your collection? So while we start to answer that, Wendy, prior to the recording, was talking about just the health concerns post-COVID in terms of the use of fidget toys. And I wanted to say, even though we're not talking about fidget toys, I did want to address the fact that we did do, I wrote a blog post at one point on the cleanability and being able to, oh my gosh, look at you, Debbie. Which ones can be sanitized. So we can send you, and Sarah will probably put in the chat a link to that. But following up on that and talking about Thumballs, I'm curious if anybody gets pushback on using the Thumballs post-COVID, because even though it's not the same as a fidget toy, it is still a ball that's communally used. And is that a concern for people? No.
Yeah, I don't.
We keep sanitizer nearby, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay. I wanted to, unless you guys have specific questions, I'm just going to throw out a few conversation prompts and see if any of these kind of hit the bill for folks. Some of the things that I thought could be useful for us to talk about are, how do you introduce you're using a Thumball? Like, how do you get started with it? We get lots of feedback, as Debbie suggested, that people really love this product, but I want to kind of dig down and find out how what makes it successful? How do you ensure that it is a positive experience for your group? How do you pick out one that you think is going to be the right tone and the right information, and so forth? I want to answer any questions that you have. I want you guys to have an opportunity to share tips and tricks and ask one another questions. So that's kind of my opening spiel, and would love to hear from you all. Like, what do you think would be most helpful?
I have lots of feedback, but I don't want to go first. Let someone else go. But I use them all the time. So anybody else?
I'll go. I work for a community college, so no, they're not worried about germs. They all live together in the dorms. But no, I use it almost all the time for my icebreakers. And what I do to make sure that I don't put anyone in a position they don't want to be is I let them choose either thumb.
Okay. Sarah, because we're recording this, Sarah's my colleague, because we're recording this and we're going to make it available, I wonder if you can kind of record in the chat some of these tips so that we have a record of them as well. So I love that idea of, people being able to use either thumb. Other suggestions or tips to help people who may be reluctant to feel more comfortable? How do you kind of set up the experience for them?
I make sure that I usually like to, if I have the time, I usually try to get them away from their chairs and get in a circle somewhere else if I have enough room. Because just getting them up and moving, and like Roxana said, my point is, I don't really care which thumb they land on. The whole point is I want them to share. So it's, we throw the ball around and, they'll say, oh, we already answered this question. I'll say, okay, we'll pick another one, pick another question to answer, right? Because the whole point isn't, I don't actually want to know a talent they wish they had. I don't, they can answer one of the other questions. And I find that is because I work with adults, with the Kiwanis leaders, right? See, they're old, and they range from like young adult to 80 years old. I mean, but I've found that tossing a ball is super easy for most people. And they don't have, some people like to toss it across the room. Some people just want to toss it to the person next to them. They have the option. I don't make any rules, and the other thing using Thumballs is you don't want it to go too long, right? Sometimes if you have a big group and you think, oh, everyone has to have a chance, it's not usually a good idea, because then people get tired and they're like, come on, let's just move on. I don't want to be all day. So trying to find the happy medium between, getting people energized and sharing, but not taking so long that it takes away from the focus you're trying to have. So that's usually a trick that I try to use.
I love also that you said if they don't like where their thumb landed, giving them the opportunity to answer any question. Because I know we're using it internally once, and one of my colleagues was like, I can't answer that question. And so we, instead of getting hung up or creating an uncomfortable situation, like you said, Debbie, the goal,
you want to keep it flowing. You want to keep the energy going. And as soon as someone gets hung up, you just say, okay, pick another one.
So do you,
that's not the point.
Yeah. Do you have other people answer the same question before it gets thrown? Or do you just, again, in the spirit of keeping it moving, one person answer and then move along?
I'm gonna say that again. Like, do people answer the same questions?
Yeah. Do you ever have people say, oh, does anybody else have that?
Sometimes people will just shout it out, right? What do you, if you had $1 million, what would you buy? Oh, I'd buy a yacht. And someone might say, oh, well, I'd buy a new house, right? And I just let it go around, and it doesn't last very long. It dies down pretty fast, but it gets people sharing, especially if all the people are going to get a chance to play with the thumb ball.
Yeah.
We get a chance to contribute. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Other suggestions, tricks, tips, challenges?
If you have time, sometimes if I have them already sitting like in a horseshoe or something and they're tossing it across the horseshoe, sometimes I'll say, well, if you've got the thumb ball, sit down. Right. Because that way they know who they can toss it to. If I already have them in a circle standing, I don't make them sit on the floor. But if they're already at a desk, sometimes you can say, well, if you've already had a turn, sit down, and then they know who they can toss it to. It makes it easier.
Okay. Excellent. How do you, I'm sorry, to create a comfort level? Okay, that was, we answered that. It seems like those, we've been talking a little bit about, kind of the getting to know you Thumballs. Has anybody used one of the other ones about leadership, team dynamics, diversity, kind of those happiness at work, any of those other sort of meatier topics? And does it make sense for us to talk a little bit about facilitating those kinds of conversations with the ball? When you can use them, how to set them up, and so forth.
Well, I give leadership classes. So, sometimes what I'll do, depending on my group, I try to read the group. If they're all big into the leadership stuff, we'll start with the leadership ball. Sometimes we'll start with the silly one. What would you buy for $1 million? And then later on, when I'm in the middle of the presentation, when we get to just before a break, I'll say, hey, let's all stand up and stretch a little bit, and let's toss this one around a little bit, because we've already been talking about leadership, right? I suppose if you're having a class and you were already talking about diversity, then you could say, all right, we've already discussed diversity for a while. We've got some ideas in our head. Hey, let's open some conversations, and then grab the ball and toss it around like 3-4 times.
And I think you're right. I think that the idea of, starting off with something that's a little bit lighter gets people talking. It gets people feeling like they're in a safe and comfortable environment before you do that. Wendy, you asked, is there a smooth transition from the icy tundra to an icebreaker? Describe what you mean by an icy tundra so we can make sure that we're responsive to that question.
Well, we have some people that are just not morning people. And, when we get together, it's like the last thing they want to do is even give eye contact, let alone, hi, I'm Wendy. I'm so happy to be here, And so, and then of course, there's the other folks that just kind of have maybe nervous expectations about what the day will hold. And so, they're not really excited or feel maybe even safe enough to start right away with, hey, get to know me. We've kind of used the Thumball a little bit later, sometimes in the afternoon as an afternoon break, that kind of thing. But, we really struggle with that first, come in, be comfortable, welcome, that kind of welcoming, to make it feel like they can truly feel welcome.
Well, I think that also comes to that question of like introducing an icebreaker in general and thinking about how can I introduce this in a way that doesn't feel stupid or like a waste of time or any of those things. And I'm curious, what tips you all might have when I have talked about some of these options and blogged and written about it a little bit. I think that it's been really helpful to share, to be really transparent and to say, here's why we're doing this. It might seem kind of silly, but I feel that we're going to have a more open session with more engagement and more sharing and more participation if we do something like this. So we're just going to take like a quick 5 minutes or a quick 10 minutes, like Debbie said, just a short amount of time, just to kind of get our energy, like just to be completely transparent about why you're doing it, what your goals are, what you hope to achieve. Because otherwise, if it feels like, one of those icebreakers where people throw their shoes into a pot, it's like, this is a waste of my time. Why am I doing this? So
one reason I like the balls is because they are they're not intrusive, right? Pretty much. And so one thing I do is I don't call it an icebreaker.
Great.
Because people freak out. Oh God, now what is she gonna make us do? Right?
Yeah.
I'll say something like, all right, well, before we get into the presentation, I know we're here early, so let's try to get our energy levels up a little bit. I know you've just had your coffee, you might have a donut, but I've got an idea. Maybe we can kind of, get our energy level up. And they all go, okay, what is that? And, then I pull my little ball, right? And then who was asking? Wendy, I think, was asking about, the people that don't like to participate. If you, like, I know my audience because I know a lot of the people that I'm presenting to, but, as a presenter, if you don't know them, talk to them, when they come in a little bit, you're going to know the ones that are the ones that want to talk, right? You're going to know the ones that are like morning people, take note of them. And then, you might say, Carol, can you start us off? I'm going to give the ball to you and I'm going to let you to pick one. And then can you just toss it to someone? Just have someone who or you start it first. Right?
Yeah, like that.
And then I know Carol is a morning person and I toss it to Carol. Carol, you go ahead. You know, because then now you've got two people that have art that are pretty good. And then if you can watch your audience, you can see the people that are like this, and you can see the people that are kind of looking. And you know, if Carol's not sure who to throw it to, you can say, "Hey, Carol, I think Sarah might want to answer a question," because you can see Sarah's going like this, right? So you just gotta watch your audience. That usually helps.
Excellent. Thank you. Other specific questions? Oh, I see Danita has asked. Let's see. If you have a larger group of 20 to 30, can you have more than one group going at a time? What do we think?
If you have more than one ball.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I think that it also kind of depends on your goal, whether you're trying to build some energy within that group of 20 and you want each other to get to know each other. Or you might say, you know, you might break people into two groups of 10 or into sixes so that they can kind of form a bond, just like you would it, you know, in terms of small group setting, and then open it up to the larger group. You know, maybe I'm just kind of making this up on the fly, but you have smaller groups working together. And then at the end of that, say, hey, you know, are there a couple of things that you discovered about each other that you want to share? Or something like that, just to use that to bind the bigger group together. And that might also help folks who are reluctant to share in a bigger group and give them just a way to create bonds with their smaller cohort.
That's a good point. If you have a big group, there might be some people that don't want to share in front of 30 people, but they'll share in front of 10.
Yeah. Yeah. Same as like having breakout rooms, right? Sarah, do you want to talk about the unzip it since you suggested it?
Actually, Bob suggested it, but curious if any of you guys have used the Unzip It or the Unzip It remote as an alternative way of using the Thumball prompts.
And do you know what we're talking about?
Yeah, or do you know what these products are?
I have the one online, the PowerPoint one. I have not had a chance to use it yet, but I'd like to use it like when I have a Zoom meeting. I probably wouldn't use it in a one-on-one, you know, in a in-person meeting, but I got it for Zoom meetings.
Sarah or Carol, one of us should just like pop out and grab one so that we can show it. Basically, I'll describe it while we're grabbing it, but it's a pocket that has a little face on it, and the zipper is sort of like the mouth. And so you reach in, and so instead of throwing a ball, you reach in for a card from a deck. And so it's a little bit of a quieter experience, but with all of the same prompts and so forth. So, you know, I've also heard from people that they're worried about people just like throwing the ball really hard at one another. And thank you. Yeah, so here's the unzip it. So you pick out a card. And so for situations like that, the unzip it can also be good. We've also recommended that, you know, before anyone answers, if they need to kind of get out their spilkies, just have people throw the ball back and forth for a little while and then say, okay, now let's use it. And that kind of comes to, you know, the idea of like having this energy break kind of thing before you get down to the content. So that can also help. Let's see. Mary asks, oh, I'm a newbie. I'm so excited. Thank you. Welcome. As you can tell, we do have a few veterans on this phone call, and as well as some Trainers Warehouse folks. Other questions about the use of the ball, about tips, about perhaps if you've used it for challenging content and, or diversity conversations, and, how you have facilitated that, or perhaps nobody's used it for that. So,
One of my challenges is to get people moving around. So I have the little baby one. Right? So the one about hop on one foot, reach your arms to the sky slowly, right? This one, I'm a firm believer in trying to keep your blood moving, because if you sit for a long time, you're just not going to pay attention. You need to get up and do stuff. My challenge is that sometimes I get those grumpy old guys that are like, I want to swing a bat. I want to swing, like pretend I'm swinging, So you just have to go with the flow, right? And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll have someone, we'll just toss it a couple times, only like 3 times, right? But I ask everyone, okay, well, kick a goal or in cheer. All right, let's, but first I'll do something simple. Like, all right, let's first stretch out, reach for the sky. All right, so now we're going to try to move around a little more, because you can't start with kicking a goal and cheering as your first one, because people are going to be like,
So also,
that's been your challenge, is trying to get everyone involved to do that.
so just so you know, that that is called the Move Your Body Thumball, and was created it's not one of the silver series. It's not Trainers Warehouse created, and was created for a broader audience, so children and whomever. Trainers Warehouse also created an Energizer one
Right.
called the Energy Break. And it does have things like breathing exercises or stretches or movements that we felt internally were, a little bit more adult comfortable. So you can kind of keep your eye out for that as well.
What was it called? What was it called?
Energy Break.
Energy Break.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, we may have just changed the name of it. Do you guys remember, Carol? Do you remember what we changed it to?
It's now the Get Moving ball.
Get moving. Okay. Either way, it's the same ball. And has ways to get people physically active.
Okay. Yeah, I'll look it up.
Absolutely. Other questions? Are we doing on time? Don't want to take advantage of your whole afternoon, your whole lunchtime. What would be helpful? Let's give it a second.
I have a question. When you're using Thumballs and the activity is over, what kind of questions do you use to debrief the activity?
Good one. Answers? I'll jump in, but I want to let other people answer first.
I mean, it depends which ball you used, right? So if I used one of the silly ones, like where would you spend $1 million? As we wrap it up, I'll say, all right, we're gonna go, before we go sit down, did you guys learn anything interesting about your fellow Kiwanians? Oh, I thought it was funny that person would buy this, or I thought it was funny that like you said, kind of a debriefing that's informal. If it's about leadership, you might say, oh, well, before we continue, did you guys learn anything? Did you have any epiphanies? Did you learn anything from us tossing the ball around? And then it gets people to think, and usually there's 1 or 2 people that have an answer, but it helps wrap up the activity before you sit down and start looking at the PowerPoint again or whatever you were doing.
I love that. So I kind of feel like there's probably 2 options. Like you said, Debbie, is pulling out something that you learned. I think the other opportunity could be grabbing something that someone said and using that as a segue to your to your content. It would be hard to say kind of on the fly what that would be, but you know, one of the tools that we have is called session openers. And from that, it pulls out some goals for the day, or, you know, things that are kind of on your mind, things that you hope to achieve. And you can use answers like that to say, okay, well, here's what we hope to achieve during this session. So any other, so those are the two uses that I can, they're the two kind of wrap ups. I think also thanking people for sharing and reiterating again with transparency of why you spent the time doing this and how you hope this experience will help people continue on this path of sharing and contributing and participating. You know, I always loved when I was doing negotiation training, and one of my co-facilitators would always say, you know, training isn't like getting a massage. It's not something that happens to you, right? We're doing this because we all have to participate. You know, it's however much you put in is what you're going to get out also. So that's kind of a good reminder to wrap up and then say, okay, well, let's jump into the content together. Let's do this.
Yeah, I try not to, well, with my audience, because I've been working with them a long time. If I tell them that this thing they have to participate in, they will immediately go, I don't want it. No. Right. So if I say, but if I trick them, and say,
Interesting.
you know, okay, we're going to do this activity to kind of wake ourselves up and, you know, kind of get used to talking with one another. They don't get that I'm actually getting them to participate, right?
Just
And
do
then
it.
and then as the session moves on, you know, if people aren't participating in stuff and I'm losing them, I can say, you know, if hopefully I have time, I can say, well, it looks like we're having kind of some down energy right now. Let's see if we can get ourselves moving again. And then I grab the ball again and say, all right, everyone stand up. And then by the time they do that, we're 2-3 little tosses, and then we do it, then I tend to have more, because they just need to wake up. They need to be poked a little bit. But I can't tell them about, if I use the word, I can somewhere in there say something about, you know, we're gonna do a lot of things together, and I'm hoping to get, you know, some participation with this and this, but I only use the word participation one time, and then that's it. And then I use other words.
Excellent. That's great. Great tip. Anybody else with questions? I'm going to pause. I know we've been talking a lot, and if you do have something that's on the tip of your tongue, I want to give you the time to unmute and formulate any other questions or fears or worries about using this and losing control, or you know, how do I know which of these balls to pick? You guys have so many of them. Other questions?
I thought about Benita when you were first talking about that, how she was mentioning last time, you know, her folks and it breaking out into a dodgeball game or something, you know. But you know, it is something to consider with us. We have, you know, the grumpy old lady faction, and then we have the guys who are semi-pro athletes, and so it's going to be kind of like, okay, be nice, you know.
There was a customer who shared a video of himself. He works with the Army and trains like an audience full of people. And he shared just a short clip of a video where in this audience, he would throw out the ball to, like, you know, somebody in the middle. And while they're thinking, everybody would like clap. And just sort of like to get this whole auditorium, you know, just kind of energized when it was being used in a big group. And I thought that was just like a really nice way to involve and to energize the group, even if you're not having everybody answer, or, just to kind of create this magnetic energy. I really loved seeing that. I don't know that we've been able to get that image live yet, but that was a good one also.
Susan, I will say, I don't facilitate, so I don't know exactly how she implements it, but we do use the diversity and the leadership. One of my instructors uses it in her classroom where she's ticking on those topics. So it's not just for icebreakers or for movement. It's also to discuss topics. And I don't know exactly how she implements them, but I do know she uses those two inside her classroom.
Thank you. Sometimes with conversations like that, again, we'll always encourage people to give participants an out or a pass, or, someone catches the Thumball, reads that question, and anybody can answer. And that's just kind of the launching point of the conversation. So do I have a leadership? Is this leadership? Yeah, be a leader. So I'd be a better leader if I spent more time on. And then that can be a whole group conversation rather than having one person feeling like they're put on the spot with that. So great tip there also. And, I also find with diversity or leadership or DEI ethics, there are topics that might come up that might feel frustrating. And I realize flip charts are kind of passe these days, but no, I love that you're shaking your head, Benita. Creating a parking lot of topics or ideas that we want to come back to, that we need to address with our managers or supervisors or other people in the organization, but recording those so that people don't feel like we're not doing anything, but there's a list of what needs to be addressed and talked about next. And where do we need to dive in deeper, and to articulate that this ball is just to start our conversation. It's not the end of it, but hopefully it gets us addressing topics that are meaningful and help us all grow. Other questions, worries, concerns, tips, things that you've done that have been great success beyond your wildest imagination?
My name's Lori. I don't have a question, but I do love what you were just saying, Susan, because I work in a healthcare setting, and we are looking at the safety Thumball to try and get more engagement with our frontline staff in terms of, instead of just giving them all this paperwork to read or courses to take, we want them to start talking to us. And I'm joining you today because I really think this is a great opportunity to do that, to try and get folks engaged. And like, I was just looking here, I love what I read on the website, where it talks about the tool is intended to supplement safety training, not to replace it. And that it's just a great way, to kick off safety initiatives and identify areas to improve workplace safety. And I'm really trying strongly to advocate for us purchasing a few of these to trial it, to pilot it, and see if we can't get if this might help in getting some of our numbers down with our injuries that are happening, that type of thing. And so I like some of them is, what would you do if you witness harassment or bullying, and to have that small group discussion. I think it's fantastic, and I'm hoping to take the recording today and share that with the teams that I am, trying to, promote this, because I especially like that you spoke about COVID and, because that's a concern, right? You're handing these around and working in healthcare setting, people, that's the first thing that's going to happen, like, oh, do we need to be sanitizing these? So thank you for answering that question. But yeah, overall, I'm really excited. I think they're more than an icebreaker. I think if you take that opportunity to make those notes, because you might ask that question, what do you do if you see someone harassing someone? Let's move further past that. Now, come back to that and see what else we can do to support our staff. So I'm loving it, especially for us, the safety Thumball. I think it's going to be fantastic. Just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. I like to think of these as they're tools for your toolbox, right?
Mhm.
And it's a resource that you can use to energize, to build conversation. It's not the training. It's not meant to be the whole training module or to replace it, but it's a tool that you can use to help make the experience fun and more memorable and, and more effective. If people are having positive emotions and feeling good about the experience, that translates, in terms of all of the neuroscience research, it becomes more of a memorable experience, and they'll grab those takeaways and remember them. So, beyond just what happens to be said in the moment, I think that that's an important outcome from using these resources as well. And I also just wanted to say is, as folks think about bringing these tools or needing to get approval to use them from higher ups, like, or fidget toys, like, they look like toys, they look like games. And, especially for the Thumballs, when it comes to topics like DEI or leadership or what have you, we typically have all of the prompts vetted by an industry subject matter expert so that we feel confident. It's probably not in our best interest as a company to list all of the prompts on our website, but having been a facilitator and a trainer myself, I would want to know if I'm buying this, that I'm not going to get into any hot water, that I can see what's on that ball before I purchase it. So if there's anything that I feel like, oh, this isn't going to be comfortable for us beyond what I feel comfortable, facilitating in the moment, I just want to know that I can make an informed decision about that. So yes, Mary, was that your question about, which was your question about, like, knowing what's on there? Or anyway, I'm glad I answered the question. Other thoughts, questions, concerns as you think about either using these yourselves or, talking to other people on your team, managers, colleagues? Anything else that we haven't covered?
I would just recommend that, when you get a Thumball, take the time to really read through it, turn it around and read through it. Maybe make some notes on some of the questions that you think are very apropos, because that will help you when you run into a dry spot in the ball tossing or something. You can always bring up one of your favorite questions. People don't want to, hey, but what about this? And you can just bring it up, because there's always a few of them on there that I find really fun and interesting. So I try to keep some of mine. So know what's on your Thumball before you throw it.
Love that. Great tip. Great tip. All right. Anything else before we wrap things up? Questions? All right. I don't want to call on anybody, but I know that there are a few people who are just listening, which is beautiful and perfect, but if there's anything you wanted to ask before we go, I want to just give a final opportunity. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here and being part of our conversation. If you have any suggestions of other topics you'd like to chat about together, please, shoot me an email. Just respond to any email that you might get from Trainers Warehouse and let us know. This is still a new format for us, and we're trying to figure out what's going to be of most use to folks. So thank you for your openness in sharing and asking questions. Debbie, you've shared so many tips, and it's greatly appreciated. Everybody is nodding. So thank you. Thank you to everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to end the recording, but I'm going to stay on in case anyone has anything else